Okay, back from the lathe. We've got the tenon has been cut, and you'll notice that the 45-degree angle at the base, that is the Dunhill trademark, so to speak, is the reason we use the lathe. The fit is as tight as it can be and be safe. It's any tighter I'd worry about cracking, any looser I'd worry about the material spinning when we're working on it. These oval ones are prone to do that. It's light tight with minimal adjustment. It only took a couple of drags on a flat sheet of 800 to get that completely square. So we're about ready to start shaping this. A few notes before doing so. The tool used to take the flash off the end of the tenon is this guy. I use it by hand, although you could put it in the drill press or something like that, or a lathe if you wanted to. And the inside of that hole, get rid of the flash with one of these guys. And all is well. I also cut the slot, which is a matter of a quick buzz with this kind of little saw blade to get things oriented. And then once you've got the saw cut slot as a guide, take a super slow turning Dremel tool, or in this case a Fordham tool, and go to town getting the slot deepened. Now this thing is round in cross section, so it leaves a beautiful edge. And if you're steady-handed, it will you can do a straight line with it. Now this takes skill to use, but once you've got it down, you can create a slot that looks new, factory new, so to speak, in just a very few minutes. It's I used to do it with wax saws and homemade saw blades and stuff, and there's no competition. This is the best solution to that slot thing that ever was. I prefer to do the slot at this point. We'll then mark. I prefer to work to the slot rather than the other way around. If you shape your entire stem and then go cutting the slot and you get it a little bit tilted, just a tiny bit, you're in trouble, because if you try to level it, you have to make it taller, of course, and then you get into problems with the thickness of the material over the bite zone. It's far easier, in my experience, and safer to cut the slot first and then shrink the rest of the stem to it rather than the other way around, because when you're adjusting the external dimensions, that can be done with great delicacy. When you're cutting a slot, it's much less forgiving, and it's anyway easier to do it first, I think. Now, a final word here before we get into the full-blown from here on out stuff. I mentioned earlier how difficult small stems were, and it looks on a video, if you're not here in hand or in the shop, it's hard to kind of know just how small this thing is. So I thought I'd show you a standard Peterson P-lip for a deluxe pipe. This is just garden variety. Nothing. It's not a giant pipe or anything. It's just a standard one. And here is what we're making in comparison. So once you actually see these side by side, it's quite an eye-opening thing. and you realize that you're working with some really small dimensions here that are a few thousandths off, and you are sunk. So it's time sort of to jump up and down a little bit about one of my favorite soapbox lectures for new stem makers. Is at all times keep in mind that it is an entirely subtractive exercise. All you can do is remove material. Even the polishing is removing material. There's nothing you can do to put it back. It's not like making clay sculptures or anything of the sort. You're not building anything, you're carving it. And it's unforgiving in the extreme. It's why so few people do it well. And if you get something as small as this, where the tenon is well under 1/4 of an inch, and you get down into this area here, the bite zone behind the button is probably about 140 on this thing. It's a tricky business because you can have many hours of work into something like this, and with a moment's inattention or a miscalculation, you've cut through to the airway and you throw it out and you start over. So this is more than ever a case of measure twice, cut once. If you're unsure, do it by hand, don't use power tools, all that kind of thing. But it does get easier with practice. So we got the stumble, all of the carbon taken out of the shank. We're going to pitch this other than using it for dimensional reference. And next step is to get this guy lined up so that the slot, freshly cut, is lined up and square with the top of the bowl out here. It's getting late. And I'm going to run some tape down the side of this and then have a visual aid when grinding away large quantities. One more thing, and this is a standard finger wag. Do not, I emphasize, do not cut your blank to its finished length to start with. You want to sneak up on that. Notice, maybe if I do it the other way around. Notice that this is about a millimeter longer than it needs to be. And the reason for that is as you are cutting down into the area behind the button and getting all of that squared away, that's a bit of an art as much as a science. And when you get it where you want it, then you want to be able to shorten the stem to where the depth of the button looks correct. If you have a firm length on that with no extra, so to speak, and you start cutting and trimming and getting the contour on the back edge of that button, and you run out of material, you're sunk. Once again, there's no putting it back. So always cut your blanks about a millimeter longer than your actual finish length. It'll save your hide with regularity. Alrighty, so that's it. Take care. I'll be back shortly and we'll continue the journey here.